Do you know what that is?
I have no idea what that is.
That's what's the lead singer of the Bee Gees name? Larry Gibbs.
Who the fuck knows?
It's an SNL skit.
Hey, millions of viewers, do you guys or listeners, do you guys know who the fuck the lead singer of the Bee Gees is?
No,
They don't.
The Larry Gibbs talk show. Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
welcome to the Cine-Scoots podcast, the movie show.
The Cine-Scoots movie show.
We're here to talk about movies and TV and sometimes politics.
And the things of the screen. Where they interact, of course. Welcome to the Dark Ages Part 2, my friend.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
We're back in the bad place.
Man, this time, maybe I'm stupid. But, like, this time I do really believe that one of them would try to, like, retroactively, like, go look at content online. And now they have AI.
Dude.
And they'll find the people talking shit.
Whatever. If they take me, they take me.
Yeah,
I'm going down swinging.
My philosophy. Fuck you, Mr. President.
Fuck you, Mr. President-elect.
Yeah.
Anyway, he is Thano.
He is Javier.
And we are here to talk about a movie that is, I think it's surprisingly good.
Pretty good.
We're talking about Heretic.
This was, we'll probably talk about this at the end, but I heard some great money A24 stats about this movie.
I am interested.
Yeah.
I'm interested about that.
Yeah.
So Heretic is the newest A24, which I think doesn't feel as A24 as other movies have felt A24. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I know that I believe like a year to a year and a half ago,
yeah,
A24 was like, we're gonna shift kind of focus, and yes, we'll still have like our artsy fartsy movies, you know, your Midsummers,
right,
your Hereditaries, your The Vivitch.
Yeah.
But they also wanted to make some like broader appeal movies.
I forget which movie it was that we were talking about, but I know on this podcast we posited the idea that perhaps they've gotten too high on their own supply. And I think this has some A24 elements, don't get me wrong, but I think it's changed directions for the better.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that like I dislike having like the hoity-toity elevated horror. I think there's a place for it.
But you can't be hoity-toity for the sake of hoity-toity.
You can't make money on solely hoity-toity,
Correct.
right? Like you need your slop every once in a while.
Which is ironic because the antagonist of this film is pretty much hoity-toity for the sake of hoity-toity. He is the A24.
So this is a movie about two, like, I almost called them Jehovah's Witnesses.
No, two Mormons.
Two Mormon missionaries.
Two young religious women are drawn into a game of cats and mouse in the house of a strange man.
Which, funny enough, that synopsis, I feel like, makes this almost feel more thrilling. I'm not saying it's not. This movie it does have its thrills, but I feel like this is a lot more of like, I don't want to say it's like a thought experiment because that sounds really hoity-toity.
It has a lot of thought experiment elements. It has, and that's why I was initially going to disagree with you a little bit on it not feeling A24. I think there is a significant segment of this movie that feels very A24 in the fact that a big part of this movie is like a thought experiment.
Yeah.
But I think it's executed in a very accessible way.
Yeah.
Which makes it very, very palatable.
Yeah, it ends up really feeling like it's very accessible, I think, and it's like in the way it executes all those things. When we were first watching the movie, I was like, oh, is this movie really going to be primarily these people just debating religion out? Like I know that really is what is marketed at first, kind of like they talk about, you know, they're trying to kind of convert him, right?
Right.
So you're like, I know that's an element of the movie, but you're not really prepared for it being like the centerpiece.
Yeah, I thought the movie would be trippier, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I do want to talk to you about that a little bit more later because I do have questions about like where this movie eventually does lead. But I do think before we get into spoilers, I want to talk about like the main cast. I think is
phenomenal.
Really good.
Yes,
like this movie really hinges on like your three leads.
Yeah.
And I feel like even though not everybody gets the same amount of screen time, like this is not a movie where you have like a lead and two co-leads or two co-leads and a lead.
You got three leads.
I think so.
You've got three leads, and they all play their role very well.
Yeah, so we have Hugh Grant, who's our main antagonist.
He's evil Richard Dawkins.
Damn.
And then you've got Chloe East, playing Sister Paxton.
Do you know anything that Chloe East has been in before?
No, but I know that her and Sophie Thatcher were both ex-Mormons.
I did not know that. You told me that, and I thought it was interesting. I know that Chloe was in the Fablemans, which is the Steven Spielberg sort of biopic.
Yeah.
And Sophie Thatcher, I've seen in a few movies. I know she was recently in Maxine.
Yes, I saw that.
She plays the person doing like the face cast for Maxine in that movie, and she freaks the fuck out. She's also the sister in Boogeyman.
Oh, yes, I heard that.
Which is fucking crazy. She's the one that beats the shit out of the Boogeyman with a baseball bat instead of the shotgun.
Man, these three of those three movies, this one is by far my favorite.
Oh, probably. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. Hugh Grant, though, I've never necessarily like disliked him or liked him a lot. Like I've always heard people talking very highly of him.
He's primarily a comedic actor, is he not?
Primarily he's I think from what I remember he's usually played like a love interest, like
a rom-com comedian.
A rom-com kind of guy, yeah. But I do think his last like roles that I really liked him in have been like more out of his wheelhouse. In this one, I really like him. He was also the bad guy in Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, I forgot.
And I was like, man, dude, this guy plays a good villain. A good villain.
Yeah.
Smarmy. He's got that wrist still, even though he's like
kind of old.
He's kind of old.
Yeah.
I think it was Sophie Thatcher recently had an interview where she was like, yeah, dude, like I had a huge crush on Hugh Grant and I get to be in the movie with him and it's so weird. And I'm like, dude, girl, I get it.
Based on what I saw from Chloe East on Instagram, they were very excited to get to work with Hugh Grant.
I mean,
and what a cool opportunity for young actors to basically share the spotlight evenly with like a bona fide star.
And it's crazy that like I get you see that happen and sometimes and you're like, I mean, I guess.
Yeah.
But like here you see that and you're like, no, I do get it, even though I'm not a huge Hugh Grant stan. Like you look at his like resume on IMDb and you're like, God damn, he's been in some crazy movies. And he's not phoning this shit in.
No.
Which I think is also like one of the wildest things. Like he doesn't need to show up for this.
Yeah.
I know it sounds bad, but he's here. He's giving it his all.
Right.
He's playing a very like commanding like presence.
A very commanding presence that has to stay like never really jumps the shark as a villain. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like it kind of feels like it might.
Yeah.
But it always skirts that line quite a bit.
Yeah.
I do, if I have one kind of complaint as far as like my negatives go, I do wish this was a little, I don't say one that's to be scarier necessarily, but I do wish it would play up that fear a little bit more. Like yeah, you're obviously scared for the two girls.
Yeah.
I mean that's built in, right?
Right.
It's built into the premise of you have these two girls who are, you know, ideally very goody two shoes religious missionaries, right? But I just kind of was looking for a little bit of extra like oomph for it. But I don't think at the end of the day that's what the movie was trying to be.
Would you say it leans more towards thriller than horror?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. But I do feel like as far as how it was marketed more as like, hey, this might be the scariest shit.
So I expected more cosmic-y stuff. And here's what I expected.
Yes.
Like, because of the way the trailers used what we find out later is just a prop little house.
Yeah, like the maze type of thing.
And then the lock on the door.
Mm-hmm.
The way the trailers use that, I straight up thought they would be in this house and then somehow get transported into like another dimension.
That's kind of what I was thinking. And there's that shot of Dante's Inferno, like it's like a picture, right?
Yeah.
It says Dante's Inferno and it's got like a huge maze. Even some of the comments that they make in the movie, I was also thinking like there's a really, and I'm not saying this is bad, again, I really do like this a lot. But I do think that there is like a parallel version of this movie where it just completely veers off track and goes into some like weird.
Totally bonkers.
And I think there's a place for both of those movies to coexist.
I think, and we can talk about this when we get to the ending. I think this movie is slightly weirder than it lets on, but that kind of depends on how you interpret the ending.
Yeah.
And whether something that I'm going to talk about later was just sloppy on the director's part, or whether something was intentional.
Okay. So with those two fairly glowing, reviews, let's go ahead and get into some spoiler territory. I know we usually say fuck your spoilers, but I do think this is a movie that like,
go see it.
Go see it. The less you know, I think the more enjoyment you'll get out of it.
We went on. Yes, I fully agree. We went on
Thursday night,
and it was pretty full.
I was surprised by how full it was. And I mean, you can tell I was actually very surprised, not just by how full it was, but by the fact that it actually got the Dolby screen.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Because I remember that week we had mentioned seeing it. I think Monday I was like, hey, you want to go check it out? You were like, sure. I look at the screens and there was only like peasant screen.
As an aside, props to this movie for being in Dolby and not just like completely lambasting my ears. Sometimes it could do that.
Sometimes it can.
And I thought the sound was just
right.
Just right.
Yeah, I do think they toned it down a bit recently. We went to see Red One on Sunday.
Yeah.
And it was a lot quieter than I thought.
Yeah.
Which is weird because that movie should have been loud.
That movie could lambast your senses.
But anyway, there's nothing in this. So just right out of the bat, this movie I think is interesting because it is kind of revealed that there really is nothing necessarily outlandish going on. So there's this whole debate, right? The whole crux of the movie is what is religion?
Yeah.
Is religion real?
Or is it bullshit?
Or is it all bullshit, right?
Except for the one true religion.
Except for the one true religion, which he's very cryptic about what the one true religion is, right? And I do think it's very interesting how he sets his his argument very much like a debate lord.
Yeah.
Where he's like, look at this and look at this and look at this and look how funny this is.
Have you met I forget what this guy's name is. I'm gonna call him Dante, even though I know his name is not Dante. So I was once out to dinner. This was in college. And a friend of
a real person?
It was a real person. And a friend of a friend was there, and then he brought his friend, and we were sitting next to each other. And then his friend just starts like normal conversation with me. And then we start talking about history. I think once he figured out like I was majoring in education. And then he talked about how he's really into like ancient civilizations and how he wants to be a teacher. He wants to inspire the youth with the truth.
Oh.
And then he starts talking about the Egyptians. And then he's like, yeah, they built these amazing things. I'm like, I know, it's fucking sick.
Yeah.
And then he's like, but how could they like cut that limestone with those copper tools? And then I'm like, I don't know. I know there's a lot of like, there's a lot about the Egyptians we still don't understand. And then he like slowly like was like walking, not just devolving, slowly trying to walk me into his like swamp of ancient aliens.
Oh no.
But that's how these fucking psychos do it. They come at you like a pedophile in a van.
Excuse me, it's a PDF file.
They try to be friends, and then they get you in conversation, and then they slowly start walking you over to the crazy.
Yeah. And I really want to give this movie so many props because I even told you walking out of this movie that I was shocked by how talky the beginning of this movie is.
Yes.
But how masterfully it holds your attention throughout the entire like talky bit.
Yeah.
Because that's what the entire first act of this movie, it's just three people sitting at a couch having a conversation about like, well, what is your religion?
Right.
And how does this compare to what you've experienced? Because he is, according to what he says, Mr. Reed, he studied religions.
Yes.
Right? He started doing that when he was in college, I believe he says.
Yeah.
And he has studied varieties of religions, trying to figure out like which is the best one for him.
Yes.
Right?
Find Wendy's.
Find the Wendy's, which I love his little weird like analogies that
Yeah.
he uses.
Yeah.
The Wendy's one I think is really good. I really like when he later reveals that like most religions do have similarities.
Right.
Right? He talks about cover songs basically.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
versions and variations of like the same 4 chords that we all know, right?
Yeah.
And that's a tactic in a movie that can very easily overstay its welcome.
It can.
Where you're like, you are absolutely reaching.
But
and he is.
He is. But then this movie does a good job of, I think, putting the right character with the right backstory in the position where she's basically like, these are all just like,
you're fucking bullshitting.
Reddit arguments.
Yeah.
But I think that's what it's very funny to me. There's a screenshot I sent you of someone in the AMC group, but like, there's a lot of people who like come away with this being like, oh, he had some good points.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I think even Jeremy Johns was like, yeah, it's like nothing I haven't heard before, but it's like some good points. And like, anyone's opinions on religion aside, I feel like not a lot of people are getting that like the movie itself doesn't really seem to think that his points are like
for
good.
Sure. I mean, the fact that at the end of the day,
yeah,
the Mormon girl is kind of more emboldened in her like stance.
Yeah.
I feel like it's proof that this movie does not necessarily support
his side,
what he's saying, right? I do think that this is a movie that like if you are not religious, like me, you watch this and you go, oh, I can see where he's coming from. Yes. But then I can also see how then the religious person says, no, this is why my beliefs are still true.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
I do think there's a certain level of smooth-brainedness that you have to be like, this movie is anti-religion.
Yeah.
Or this movie is super religious. I think this movie definitely...
Yeah, because I don't think it comes out like totally pro-religion either.
No, I think this movie is a good in-between.
I think it kind of takes it like religion is what you make of it.
And how, like, I think this movie really does, not just that, but like how people personally... have their relationship with their own religion. Yeah, exactly. Right? Because different people can have different experiences, right? Yep. It's all about your lived experience. And I do think that's a good dynamic to have between Sister Barnes and Sister Paxton. Yes. Who, Barnes is a convert.
Yes, and Paxton's a cradle.
Yeah, so Barnes apparently lived in Philadelphia. She moved to Utah. Yeah. Mom converted. She converted. Yeah. And shit was bad, so they found solace in the religion, right?
Which a lot of Mormons I know come from families that had troubles.
Yeah, which I mean, tracks, right? Yep. You're looking for some sort of peace. You're looking for some sort of sense in the world, so that makes
stability.
Paxton has always been in the religion, so she's more,
and it shows.
Oh my god, that first scene
with the magnums,
where they're talking about condoms, they're talking about watching porn. It was so awkwardly funny to me.
So awkwardly funny, but then also just every scene where she is just like polite to a T.
Oh my!
It's so fucking Mormon.
It's polite to one of those degrees where you're like, if you get killed, honey, you had every chance.
Yeah, I know. Like you could levy this critique at almost any horror movie where you're like, run, but like in this movie especially, I was like, y'all needed to be out of here like.
For sure.
10 hours ago.
But I do think, not just that, I do think the way this movie sets itself up, you know that even if they are not running, they can't run, right? Yeah. The phones don't work. Why? Well, he did tell you walking in, hey, you okay with the metal in the walls? And they're like, okay, sure, whatever.
And it would take a very polite Mormon to just like, I'm not saying not everybody would do this, but like a very like, someone who's worried so much about being polite and like keeping like up social sensibilities.
And this isn't even a Mormon thing. I think it's just people in general.
Rush that shit off.
Yeah.
Right? Because when I heard it, I was like, the fuck? And like, I mean, obviously I knew to expect something. But I was like, I forget if I turned to you and I was like, would there be any reason to have like...
You did.
Yeah. I was like, is he referring to lead? And then we find out later that he was like...
Yeah, this house is basically...
He was pulling a fast one on him.
Yeah. Which, again, just kind of proves that, like, he is so good at disarming people.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that's really how he gets the girls into the house. Yeah. I do find it kind of interesting though that they kind of really focus on the Mormon aspect of this movie, which is something that's not really touched on in a lot of religious horror.
Yeah.
Right? It's usually straight up Christianity, Catholicism. I think lately we've been getting some maybe Jewish. Not a lot.
Yeah.
I know there's a couple movies that have come out that deal specifically with like Jewish religion in horror.
Yeah, because Mormon's interesting because, like, I would say most of the population codes that one as more bullshit than the others.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I feel like that one, Jehovah's Witnesses, are two that I can immediately point out.
Yeah.
That I'm like, oh yeah, people look at this and go, that's weird.
Exactly.
Scientology also comes to mind.
That's the peak weird, and then Jehovah's, and then Mormons.
I wonder if there will be, in the next 10 years, a Scientology-based horror movie.
With a Scientologist protagonist?
Either Scientologist protagonist or like a Scientologist outright like the villain.
The better movie would be to make them the villains. I think it's illogical. I think it'd be very hard to rehabilitate the image of a Scientologist.
But even then, I feel like this movie doesn't necessarily do any favors for like rehabilitating Mormon.
Only in the sense that like the Mormon characters are very endearing.
Yeah, we're endeared to Paxton and Barnes, but I don't necessarily think that they come across as like, no, Mormons are actually normal people.
Well, it's interesting because there's a lot of time. Now I'm kind of jumping out of order, but there's a good chunk of time dedicated to the subplot that like their church knows that they're out canvassing. So if they don't hear back, they're gonna check in. I mean, we dedicate scenes to this character who's like taking care of the church.
Yeah.
And then he goes to Hugh Grant's house. And like Hugh Grant, does an effective job of like waving him off. And like you think for a moment that he's gonna like not buy it, but he's back and he's like, oh, like come toward,
which is I think the funniest laugh in the movie. But I think it's because before that scene plays out, you're under the impression that their bikes are still out there.
Yes, it fulfills multiple functions. One for the bikes, two to attack the plot point of that, like, oh, wouldn't someone be looking for them, right? But then three, I think, bringing it back to this conversation about not rehabilitating the Mormon church, you do see an image of a Mormon in authority who's just like
whoop, whoop.
Very worried about the procedures and very incompetent, right?
Yeah.
So it does. I agree with you ultimately that it doesn't fully rehabilitate like Mormonism.
Yeah. So they are led to like his study after shit starts to go down. They are led to the study where they are given the choice. Right? He says you basically have to choose your way out. And that is one of these two doors. You either choose your belief or disbelief.
Yeah.
Which we find out is irrelevant.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's his game, right? Have we talked about what the true religion is for him yet?
We haven't mentioned it outright.
But
it's control.
It's control, right? Yeah. Which from a very like nihilistic way.
Yeah.
Like if you ask a non-religious person, an anti-religion person, I feel like they would look at that and go, absolutely, that is.
So then,
right?
Would you agree with the statement that he is a believer? He is just a believer in the idea.
I think that's what he believes. Yeah. Right. I do think that as far as the way the character is written, I do think that he believes that.
Yeah.
I don't think necessarily. Again, I don't think that's what the movie is.
No.
Blaming
what he believes, right? What he believes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's kind of where I think this movie could split. Right, because he leads them down. He's telling them they have an option, but at the end of the day, they don't. Right? Regardless of which path they choose, you later find out that both doors lead to the same place.
And the road made no difference.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So they go down into this weird, shitty like dungeon. Yeah. Where like the weirdest lady comes down.
Yeah.
And she just like eats a pie.
And this is where. At first, I thought she definitely. This is where I thought like the random supernatural just like came. I mean, like the way she initially enters looks supernatural, right? And then slowly you realize that there is some chicanery going on, right? But yeah, she She eats a pie, a blueberry pie.
Blueberry pie dies.
Yeah.
They're distracted and all that shit. But then I do kind of wonder, what is his plan? Because unless the plan already played out and he was planning on doing basically this from the beginning, like if he's playing some 5D chess, because the way we see it as it is edited in the movie, they're down there, the lady croaks, he's telling them like she'll come back in a couple minutes, like just watch her and then tell me what she says. And then the doorbell rings.
Yeah.
And the girls are obviously going to try to get the attention of whoever's knocking.
Yes.
Right? He slams the door. They find out like, shit, it's soundproof. It's, whatever. But during this is when there's like that switcheroo, right? Where we later find out that he's got like a whole group of like brainwashed disciples.
Yeah.
Right? He's almost like his own like, he's his own cult leader, right? Yeah. And they basically threw the dead person down. The person is dead.
Right.
The person's dead, and now it's somebody else.
They threw her into the dungeon.
In the dungeon of the dungeon, right? But it's during this scene where I thought we were going extra cuckoo bananas because he fucking like kills Barn.
Yeah.
Like out of nowhere, just fucking slits her throat. And then he starts telling Paxton like, no, we're in like an alternate reality. She's an NPC.
Right.
She's got like, this is why it didn't work, because she's got this like fucking like weird thing.
Yeah. Which she had to dig for to find.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is where, because I think in the condom conversation they are talking about birth control.
Mm-hmm.
So that I was trying to rack my brain at the beginning. I was like, would he have had any clue that she was on birth control?
She does. Or he does.
Yeah.
Because in that scene where he's talking to them, he looks at Paxton, who is awkwardly like fidgeting. Yeah. She like scratches her arm and he sees the scar.
And you can, I don't know if you've ever seen one, but you can feel it. Like they're very, like if you put your hand on there, you can definitely feel that, like whatever those implants are called.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I guess they could be visible. I don't know. But I was like, when he was reaching into her arm, I was like, okay, he has to know that that's there.
Well, you see the scar. You see the poke and like a line.
Yeah.
And I think that's what clues him in that it's there.
Yeah.
And it's one of those, like, he has to be like kind of thinking really far ahead as to how he can use this.
Right.
Which I guess props for him.
I think it's in character.
It's in character for sure. He does seem like the kind of guy who's very observant and uses like the observations that he sees.
Yes.
To kind of scheme at like at an instant.
Yeah. And he only wants to use his talents for evil. So like he would be able to focus enough to
as some people come to realize that some people have a lot of sway and they use it for the worst possible reasons.
Exactly.
And that's kind of where I was like, this would be a really weird, interesting movie if it then does delve into like, no, this is like a simulation.
Yeah, I don't know at one point in the movie where I was fully convinced that like all of his chicanery really just is
just that
chicanery. It was pretty far in.
I think for me it was when she says there is no profit.
Yeah.
I think when she says no, there's no profit, I was like, oh, okay, this movie's not going to try to rug pull. When she then like says no, there's got to be something under here, I feel like that's when I was like, that's
when she figured, because also whenever Sister Paxton lands a disarm, or whenever my computer died, what's the other one's name?
Barnes.
Whenever she lands a disarm, he doesn't really have like a retort.
Yeah.
And you can tell that he's bothered. He just kind of moves on to the next.
Yeah, he just kind of like stops and just like, all right, moving on.
Yeah, and he's pissed.
Oh, for sure.
And he's pissed.
And she calls him out on that. And I do like that dynamic between the two where even though Barnes ideally is the one that's coming into the religion, you would assume she's more likely to be kind of like swayed out of it. That's the expectation, at least if you ask me.
Yeah.
Right? Someone who is a convert, whereas someone who's been living with it all their life, where you're kind of like, well, you should ideally be maybe more
Oh, so see, no,
You feel the opposite?
no, yeah, there's like a quadrant, and you got like your intentional cradles who were born into it, but then for whatever reason have like really bought into it. You have your unintentional cradles who were like born into it, and they're like, like whatever. You got your non-intentional converts who usually will like convert through marriage or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
and then you've got your intentional converts. More often, you see your intentional converts and like your non-intentional cradles. So yes,
So,
the converts tend to be more zealous.
but I do get that, but my point for that thinking was the fact that she seemed unsure at the beginning.
Oh
There were
yes,
like the way the conversation was happening, she didn't seem like she was bought in.
yeah,
If she was the one who was like, "No, I got brought in, and this is the happiest I've
right.
been," I feel like I'd have been like more willing to buy into that.
Which a lot of converts are like, right? A lot of converts do kind of like buy in, but then sort of abandon a lot of reason,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you do have some who like have still kept their like their vast knowledge of whatever they've seen in the world, right?
Mm-hmm,
So I have a lot of for that. I have like a lot of respect for Sister Barnes
mm-hmm.
that like she's able to be a rational, like open-minded, like person who like hasn't just abandoned, right, her old self or
Yeah,
at least her
yeah.
knowledge of other things. So yes, it is a bit surprising, but I've seen that type of person before, so that's why I'm not as surprised.
Yeah, I just thought that the way they had kind of portrayed her character at the
Yep.
beginning, that's where I found surprising. Whereas I do get what you mean, but like when you convert, you're the one making that active choice, so it
Yep.
does make more sense that you're more drawn to it. Um, I do kind of want to go back and watch this movie, and I might go sometime this weekend with Katie because I do feel like she could absolutely watch this, no
Yeah.
problem. Um, because I want to see the clues that they
Yeah.
point out. Because there's one where they're like, she's like, "Oh yeah, the lock. How did it get there?" And she goes, "Well, when you went to get your pie, you went outside and you grabbed the bikes and the key and the lock and everything. You
Yeah.
accidentally fucked up and you flipped the things, but you actually didn't fuck up. You were intending me to find the key."
Is there so in the opening scene he goes to like water his plants, but it's also while like a rainstorm is happening. And we find out later he uses the watering can for watering his like his captives.
Yeah.
But that was one thing that initially was like odd about me. And I've watered like I know sometimes like the rain won't get the pots,
Mm-hmm.
but like I'm not really gonna go water the plants outside with the with the thingy
Yeah.
while it's raining. So I'd kind of like to see just to see what I notice about that opening again.
Yeah, and
the
I
water
want to
can.
see if his hair is wet in that scene
Yeah.
where it's after they've been together for a few minutes, and I think it's after the second round of him saying, "I'm gonna go check on the pie"
Yeah.
and everything, where he comes back and his hair is wet.
Yeah.
So I'm curious as to like how much that tracks and how much that might have been just like edited in there. But I do feel like this is one of those types of movies that like it wants to reward you on the second watch.
I could see that.
I know a lot of A24 movies do that
Well,
where
it wants you to engage. It wants you to spar with the.
um I'm also kind of curious about so we can kind of fast track to it. She gets stabbed by him. He
Yeah.
fucking like gets shivved in the throat, doesn't die.
Yeah.
They have their final confrontation like in the initial first dungeon.
Right.
And he does look like he's about to kill her, and then out of
And then he gets
nowhere,
thwacked.
Paxton just fucks his shit up.
All right. Anyway, let me hear your opinion on that sequence first, because I have opinions and I have questions.
In what sense?
Initially, that bothered me for reasons of realism, which I know can be nitpicky, but I was like, all right, it's been enough time. This girl's been like cut in the throat, and she had her like arm sliced open and dug into.
Mm-hmm.
She's dead.
Yeah.
No ifs, ands, or buts. Like the jugular is the jugular.
The jugular is the jugular
Yeah.
for sure. I do think for the purposes of like the way the movie kind of plays out, I'm like, all right, whatever. It's not
Okay.
make it or break it.
It's
I
not
do
make it or break
find
it.
it a little incredulous.
But that's what kind of led me to 3.5 stars. And that's where actually I also thought he lived too long
Yes.
with a neck wound.
And that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I feel like because he lived that long, I'm like, oh, might as well have Sister Barnes live that long too.
Yeah.
Because I think for her, it's more of you don't see it be like a deep cut because
Yeah.
he's using like an X-Acto knife.
Yeah.
So you could make the argument that it was not as deep as you would expect.
But it's a lot of blood.
It is a lot of blood, but
a lot of blood.
it's a lot of time. I think it's more the time than the lot of blood, if you ask me. I do think that like while she is like bleeding profusely, there's never a scene where you're like she is gushing.
No.
And as far as the arm goes,
it's not a mortal wound.
No, but he does make a point at one when he's digging through it. He's like, "Oh, that's a vein."
Yeah, he's like digging in there.
Yeah,
that's trauma. That's trauma.
It's trauma, but the fact that he points out the fact that he has not cut the vein and he's yanking on the vein, that he didn't cut like a severe vein.
Severe vein.
So I'm like, there's wiggle room.
Yeah.
It's one of those things like if I really want to be nitpicky, I could let it, bother me more. But I just think that the movie on its own does enough to earn the goodwill for me to be like, I'm willing to look past it.
So my nitpicky self would say that if you just had him die at the neck wound, I could have actually done without the whole fight at the end. Like I think the conflict actually resolves pretty well there
after that,
because she's bested him in the moral ground and like the intellectual ground, right? So you didn't really need like another action sequence.
Yeah.
However, would you say that Sister Barnes, right?
The one who was dead?
Yes.
Yes.
Would you say that the film thinks that this is a miracle?
I think if they play it up as a possibility that she is alive at the end, I feel like then they could play with that a little bit more. I initially thought that's where it was going.
Yeah. Because it's juxtaposed with the scene of her like holding out her hand and the butterfly's there and she sees it, right?
Yes.
And this could be something that's all in her head or it could be like a sign. But I was like, I wonder to what extent the film is trying to do something with, because you've seen, he calls the prophet coming back, right? He's like, you're about to witness a miracle, right? And it's not a miracle.
Yeah.
But then you see this other prophet coming back, right, in the form of Sister Barnes. And then I was like, I wonder.
So I think this could be one of those aspects where, like, if this was a movie that was outward on its face claiming religion is good,
and it's not,
this could be the angle they play.
Yeah.
But I think because it's not, I think it leads that wiggle room of no, it's not going to 100% say that she is really alive and that it's a miracle that she's alive. Again, I do feel like if they had made the point for her to be like, oh shit, you're not dead, like you're holding on like barely.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go get help. Maybe I could see that argument being more like, yes, it could be seen as a miracle. But because I feel like it doesn't quite commit to that, I'm like, maybe not.
I agree it doesn't commit. I think for me, it re-solidifies my idea that one of the themes of this movie is that faith is kind of what you make of it. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that's why I think now that we've talked, I think it does make an intentional choice that it's saying, viewer, you could interpret this as a miracle.
It's the Inception top at the end. Is it wiggling? Is it not wiggling? Right. And it's the same thing with the butterfly.
Yeah.
Right. Is the butterfly actually landing on her or not? Because like you see it.
Right.
We get a good shot of the butterfly landing on her finger, which is what she described
as what she wants
when she dies. Yeah. But then there's a hard cut to like a different angle, still the same scene, her hand's still out,
and
the butterfly's gone. Right. So I don't know what that necessarily means. It could be that she's dead.
I think it could be that she, like, when you say she, you mean Sister Paxton or Sister?
It could be that Sister Paxton's dead because she got stabbed.
Yeah, interesting.
And, whether, again, we're talking about fatality of wounds.
Yeah.
You get stabbed, and he had that shit.
Yeah, that shit.
Deep.
I don't think she's dead. I don't think she's dead. But
Yeah.
I think maybe I would say the film is saying she herself experienced a miracle, but whether you want to call it an objective universal miracle is is another story.
I mean, having someone about to stab you in the fucking throat and then your
Yeah,
not so dead friend smacking them in the face with a piece of nail
Yeah.
wood.
Nailwood too. That's another
Pretty
thing.
miraculous.
That was another thing that I also for me when I saw Nailwood, I definitely thought like crucifixion,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm curious as to what extent they were playing with.
I feel like that feels intentional.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. I'm pretty happy with the way like this movie at the end of the day like plays coy with a lot of these themes.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's easy to say like, oh, it feels uncommitted, like it feels like the way out, but
Doesn't need to commit.
it doesn't
Yeah.
exactly. I feel like there's a lot more fun, a lot more discussion to be had with like the ambiguity of this movie.
Yeah,
I just think all around like the way the performances come through, the way that like the actors commit to the roles, I do feel like lets me kind of give even more wiggle room to this.
yeah.
I might go back and honestly like if I see it again and I like it more, I might rate this quite a bit higher. The more I think even you said this too, like the more you think about it, the more you seem to enjoy it. Like I do feel that way
Yes.
for sure.
It ages well.
Mhm.
I would say it was a little boring, even though those conversations are still
It can be.
boring from slowness.
It's slow,
Yeah.
but
That's I mean a little boring. A little boring.
I think this could be edited down maybe like even 5 minutes,
Yeah.
like 5-10 minutes to cut out some of the slight repetitiveness of it.
But even that repetitiveness serves to characterize the villain.
And that's what I'm saying.
He just keeps beating you over the head.
I have a hard time deciding what I would necessarily cut out.
Yeah.
I do feel like the second conversation about the board games is where
Right.
you're like, all right, I get it.
Yeah.
Like maybe trim this part down just a bit. But I do have to admit, like I had a good time listening to him.
Oh, for sure.
Like riff on this shit.
Yeah.
What were you thinking about? Because you were talking about like money wise for this movie.
Oh, I think I heard or read highest grossing A24 opening weekend movie.
I think of this year.
Okay.
I think. Well, I don't know. Let's see.
Look it up.
Because I know Dan was talking about that. Is that what you were talking about?
I didn't see it from Dan. I haven't heard from Dan in a long time actually.
Oh,
I know he's still making contact.
for sure. He was talking about how it's made pretty solid money.
Yeah.
As far as like the box office goes, it's like at 11 million in the US for opening weekend.
So top 5 A24 grossing movies of all time after one weekend.
Uh-huh.
That's for its all time. It took Heretic one weekend to become one of A24's highest grossing films.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know if it broke the opening weekend for A24, but it did. It had a very good opening weekend.
It did. I'm very much looking forward to kind of what A24 does with these more like broad appeal movies. I do think they need to be careful because this movie does kind of run the risk of what's it called? Misleading its audience, I guess you could say. Like if they're not careful, they can end up in a situation with like movies where they feel like they're not marketed properly.
Yeah.
Like, yes, you can try to like appeal to a broad audience, but at the end of the day, you also then need to commit to
what you're selling.
Yeah. If you don't do that, then people are going to feel like they've
been duped. They've been bamboozled.
And then that's when you get into like a very bad then second week drop.
Yeah.
Which tends to happen to a lot of horror movies where people feel like they're not marketed accurately.
Yeah.
So who knows what we'll get from our friends at A24, which is kind of interesting that the people who made this movie, Scott Beck and Brian Woods, the last movie was 1965.
Oh wow.
That dinosaur in space movie.
Wow.
Yeah.
I missed that one, but I wanted to see it.
It was not bad. Not great.
Yeah.
Not bad. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Remember to give us a like, give us a share.
Go see this movie.
Go see this movie for sure. I highly recommend it. I think it's in a year where we need some detachment from reality.
Yep. This is a good.
You could be doing a lot worse things than watching this movie.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody. Until next time, he has been Thano.
He has been Javier.
This has been the Cine-Scoots movie show. Bye.
Bye.